being. Existence can carry some kind of identity, whereas presence at hand or facticity will not. Right? So, in significance, for instance, things can remain identical. In the assignment Dasein makes to itself, there can be some kind of stability. Right? And we'll figure out what that has to do with ethics later. But, okay, so now we're going to jump down. Heidegger here suggests, though, that in fact the thing that I just highlighted, the problem of the self, right, where do we find a self, it may be the case that Dasein, the who, the very last sentence of page 115, it could be that the who of everyday Dasein just is not the I, myself. And there what he's telling you really is, yeah, you're not. None of us are. We like to think that we are ourselves, that we have a self, that we choose ourselves, whatever else. But it could be that the average everyday Dasein is in fact not ourselves, and that's where we're headed. So, how is it that we live in the world? We're going to come back up to being in the world. And the fact is that in being in the world, when we talked about it in terms of equipmentality, I didn't write that up here, huh? But you should really know that. Circumspection and dealings and equipmentality. That we run into things that have an in order to assignment, right? This is in order to do that. And that in order to always ends with a Dasein somewhere, right? So we make the walls to build the house to sell to someone who's going to live in this as their home. So that even when that future buyer is not present with the carpenter as Dasein is nonetheless using his hammer and giving it significance with reference to a Dasein out there. Just generic one, right? If, however, the owner, the future owner of the house, or the one who's paying for it all, who's gonna own the house, comes to you personally and hires you to do the job, and hires you to build the wall, then you know who you're making the house for. And when you finish the wall, you say, yeah, Sarah is going to be happy with this wall, right? That's what you're thinking. Is Sarah going to be okay with this workmanship or not, right? Because even if she's not there on the site, she is there in significance, right? Does that make sense? So the people or the things that are in the world factically, in our world, in our concernful dealings with things that give equipment their significance, in that world, there are also others who are Dasein like me. And we aren't living in the world with others in the same way that we live in the world with things. People are different than things. Dasein, with, is different than ready to hand with, right? My being with this marker is very different than my being with you, right? For instance, if I say to this marker, you're the dumbest marker, I'm going to give you an F for the day, you suck. Okay. But if I were to say that to you, it's a terrible way of being with others, right? There's a different kind of quality of being with Dasein than there is in being with things that are ready to hand, right? So in the world of a Dasein, there is always being with. And that being with, he calls it Mitdasein, is being with other Daseins. You never run into equipment without running into Mitdasein too, without running into others. These other people, other Dasein. When you run into an object, even an object that you've never seen before, you know that it's somebody's. And that someone is there even when they're not there. They're there with you existentially, even if they're not there ontically. Does that make sense? Or let's go back to that example of the woman who used to call me at 12:15 every day, right? And the phone became something that needed an assignment, right? It needed some in order to. It had taken on this significance for her at that time. And so she needed to give it a new assignment in order for it to not be so conspicuous. What was so conspicuous to her? What did that phone sort of bring to her world? Her father. But was her father actually there? Was he ontically there? No, right? He's dead. So in what way was he there? To use a Heideggerian term here, how was she there? Yeah, there was a phenomenon there for sure, right? The thing itself, the real being was not the phone. The phone was the sort of appearance or the seeming, and it stood in the place of her father, right? Yeah, the phone maybe. I would say here he became conspicuous, right? And these things do happen with our being with others, not just with being with equipment, right? Being with others, people can become, as Dasein, conspicuous, obtrusive, and obstinate, absolutely so. And those conspicuousnesses, obtrusivenesses, and obstinacies are different than when equipment that's ready to hand is conspicuous and obtrusive and obstinate. People can be conspicuous. Like we've been making the joke about the people who come in late, right? And they become conspicuous. But there's a quality to a person's conspicuousness that's different then. How about if you go to any really expensive restaurants and then a bum comes in and asks you for $5 for a burger? Do you think that people who go to really expensive restaurants appreciate that? Probably not, right? Why does this bother them so much?
Because I'm in a 5-star restaurant, I would expect staff to be on.
Yeah, people should shield you from this, right? Like the person, the bum, becomes conspicuous in their need, in their hunger. And what are you doing right at that moment? Eating expensive food that could probably pay for this guy's next month of eating, right? So you get angrier, your world just cracked in some way. Someone became conspicuous, but what they brought along with them is a world of significance that you don't want to be significant, right? That whole, and maybe you feel some guilt or some shame or whatever. We'll deal with that with Heidegger in a little bit, but that can happen in a way totally different than if the fork just is missing one of its tines. The fork becomes conspicuous. You say, give me another one. Person becomes conspicuous. You don't just say, give me another one. Unless you're Kim Jong-un or Donald Trump or something, right? When people become conspicuous, you replace them. That's what you do with equipment, but not really with other Dasein, right? Do other Dasein become conspicuous, obtrusive, or obstinate in your daily, average, everyday life with the people you live with? Anytime someone is annoying, one of these things is going on. Right? They're not fitting in to the ready to hand that they should be for you in your world. And that's why they become conspicuous, obstinate, or obtrusive. And yet, you intrinsically feel that you cannot treat them like a conspicuous piece of equipment. Right? Your dealings or concern factically with your environment brings many things into the readiness to hand way of being. Frees them up to be ready to hand. But you also run into Dasein in your everyday dealings with the world. But you cannot interact with Dasein the same way you do with just equipment. You just don't. So that tells you something about being with that carries a different kind of concern. And that kind of concern is called solicitude for Heidegger. The word for the way you have others in the world as being with them is solicitude. This is seeing other Dasein. And Heidegger makes some really nice little moments. It's really worth reading that section 25 and 26. Dasein is the sort of thing that can be in a crowd when all alone and be alone in a crowd. Right? Like, so for instance, going back to the friend who's in love, and their heart is aching when their beloved is not by them. This person could be surrounded by all kinds of people and still feel quite alone. And that feeling alone is a way that the lover, the beloved, is present. They are present in absence. The form of their presence is an absence, right? The woman who missed her father, who had passed away, he was there as not there. And that's a totally different thing than just not being there. When someone is just not there, they're not in your world. You don't even think they're not there, right? There's nothing going on there. You're not thinking about them. They're not in the world at all. They're not something ready to hand. They're just not. They're not a part of the world at all. But when they are present in their absence, they can be deeply in the world, in that way of not being there at all. Does that make sense, right? So like so being with others isn't just a matter of sharing the same environment with others, right? It's about solicitude. Solicitude is being aware of others as Dasein too. And it's the kind of care you have for other people, is the way we might say it, right? They show up. In your average everyday life, this solicitude is hidden to you. You don't notice it. It's just in the background. It just functions there. You deal with others. And when you encounter others, you don't just encounter others waiting for you to care for them. You encounter others who are already actively involved in their own in order to. But you run into people who are at work, who are doing things, right? Not just people who are waiting to be a part of your world, right? And so the difference, say, between being with a Dasein and being with equipment is equipment has no significance independent of your assignment of some way of being for yourself. But other Dasein, it's not waiting for you to free it up, right? It's already got its own way of being.
So touching on the solicitude versus concern, did you already touch on what's the difference with concern as well?
Yeah, so concern has to do with equipment. Okay. We concern ourselves and have dealings with stuff that we use to make ready to hand in order to. Okay. But solicitude is the kind of concern we have for other Dasein. Okay. Right? Concern is the kind of thing we have for equipment. Right? Solicitude is a different kind of thing. So if you turn to page 154, who is it that we run into when we run into other Dasein? He uses the word others. And so look at the very last couple of sentences on page 154. By others, we do not mean everyone else but me, those over against whom the I stands out. They are rather those from whom, for the most part, one does not distinguish oneself, those among whom one is too. That is, most of the time, others are just part of your world, just like equipment is part of your world, that you don't notice. They don't stand out. That's the way it goes best. Your world is the one that functions without you noticing that it's functioning the way that it is, right? And that includes then the others. The others are, for the most part, the people that don't stand out. The ones who are not conspicuous, not obstinate, not obtrusive. That's the way the world generally works, right? This being there too, auch Dasein, also being there, right, with them does not have the ontological character of a being present at hand along with them within a world. This with is something of the character of Dasein. The two means a sameness of being as circumspectively concerned for being in the world. With and to are to be understood existentially and not categorically. By reason of this with-like, being in the world is always one that I share with others. The world of Dasein is a with world. Being in is being with others. Their being in themselves within the world is Dasein with. Even if you were all on your own in a cabin in Montana, 500 miles away from anyone, you would still be in the world with others. Dasein will never not be in the world with others. And the reason why, you should already be able to see with a baby only gets an idea of itself in being with others. It can only make assignments of what it's going to be to itself based on being with others. Being with others is there before you are a self. Before you have any significance, you're already being with others. And before you can give any significance to anything else in the world, you are already being with others. And you will never be separate from that. There will never be a time in your life when you will be truly alone. Because making an assignment to yourself drags along with it, we might say, the baggage of the world that you grew up in, that you have submission to, right? That you've been submitted to already. You tapped out long ago to that world, right? And therefore, being in is being with others. Our being in the world is a being with. Right? And therefore, those others aren't just things that I share the world with. They are my world. They are as much my world as I am my world. I am with them in this sense. I am inseparable from them. It doesn't make any sense for you to say me versus you.